All right, everybody, I'd like to go ahead and get us started with today's session. Welcome to the NinjaTrader webinar room and welcome to the session today, ATM 301, where we're going to be continuing our discussion that we started yesterday about semi-automated strategies, or as we call them, ATM strategies, which stands for Advanced Trade Management. So if you weren't here with us yesterday, ATM strategies are basically an automatic way to submit protective stops and profit targets with your entry orders. And today we're going to get a little more in depth into the advanced features of setting up these ATM strategies. Before we really get in, I'd like to take a moment to test for picture and sound. So if you can hear my voice and see the slide on the screen, please enter a Y into the room. Thank you very much. Sounds like I'm coming in loud and clear. Okay, before we get started, I'd like to note it is important to understand that there are substantial risks involved in trading commodity futures contracts. You should therefore carefully consider whether such trading is suitable for you. This will depend on your specific circumstances and financial resources. It is possible to lose all of the funds deposited with your broker, and you could even incur losses beyond these amounts. Please send an email to brokeragesupport@ninjatrader.com for more information or for a copy of the CFTC full risk disclosure. Also, please remember that these training webinars are not a solicitation or a recommendation, but simply educational in nature. So today we're going to talk about, as I said, some more advanced features of ATM strategies. We're going to talk a little bit about auto break-even settings. However, for those of you who joined me yesterday, we did cover that in more detail. We went through and we set up an auto trail and an auto trail plus 2 ticks in what we call a stop strategy. Today we're going to be talking about, we did auto break-even yesterday. Today we're going to be talking about trailing stops, and we'll also talk about simulated stops and some of the other advanced features such as automatic reverse at close, and auto chase for your entry orders. So today we're going to give you all the rest of the tools that you need to use ATM strategies to their full capacity and to just get the most out of these things that you possibly can. So if you've been with us throughout the week, you'll notice we're building a workspace in NinjaTrader, one event at a time. And the workspace that you see there on the slide, that's the one we've been working with. Today we're just going to be focused once again on that area that's highlighted in yellow. So we'll be working primarily in ChartTrader and the Superdome. And we will be using the simulated data feed once again so that we can control the trend in the market. All right, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop and we'll jump right in today. So I'm currently connected to Kinetic. First things first, let's disconnect from Kinetic. And I'll activate the simulated data feed by clicking File, Connect, Simulated Data Feed. For those of you who are not familiar with this, the simulated data feed consists of completely fake data. So from this point on in the presentation, my platform is going to be generating data on its own. It's not going to be market data. The reason that we're using this is because with this little trend slider, I can control the direction that the market goes. So this is going to be good for testing things like auto trailing. So we don't have to sit here together for 2 hours and wait for the trail to happen. We can just make it happen whenever we like with the simulated data feed. All right, so let's just jump right in. Yesterday we created a ATM strategy template and we called it Webinar 1. So let's pull that up here. It was a 1-target strategy set up for 2 contracts, and we had an 8-tick stop loss and a 10-tick profit target. We then went in and created a stop strategy by pulling down the stop strategy drop-down menu here, and we created a template as well. Today let's just create a brand new stop strategy by clicking Custom in this drop-down box. So just a quick overview of what we did yesterday. I won't spend too much time on it for you guys who were with us yesterday. But we created an auto break even. We put in a profit trigger of 4. And we said plus 2 ticks. And so let's see that at work as a starting point here. So I'll go ahead and enter long. We can see the stop loss and profit target automatically submitted. Now I'm going to crank the trend upward. And when we gain 4 ticks in profit, we should see that stop loss move. There we go. It moved to break even plus 2. So just a quick refresher on what we were doing yesterday with that auto break even. So now let's take it to another level. Now, once again, I'm going to open my Stop Strategies window by pulling down the Stop Strategy drop-down box and clicking Custom. Let's get the auto break-even out of there. And let's talk about setting up an auto trail. So one thing that's really great about auto trails is that in NinjaTrader you can set up to 3 steps. So what you can say essentially is, when I hit X ticks in profit, start trailing my stop loss X ticks behind the market price. But when I hit this other level of profit, now tighten it up and trail it even closer. And then when I hit this other amazing level of profit, I've got 20 ticks in profit, then tighten it up and trail it even more. This is really, really useful. For example, if you're using a trailing stop to follow a trend and you think, the longer the trend goes, the more likely it is to turn around. Let's say that that's what you're thinking, that's what you're guessing about the market. Then you might want to utilize that trail by tightening it up the higher that your trade rides the trend. Because statistically speaking, maybe you figure that the longer the trend goes, the more likely it is to turn around on the next bar. So I'm just going to start with a single step here, and then we'll demonstrate a multi-step strategy. But just really quick, to add more steps, we'll use the 1-step, 2-step, or 3-step radio buttons here. A lot of people think 1-step, 2-step, and 3-step apply to the column beneath it. That's not the case. Think of this little row of radio buttons as being independent from these here. What this will do is add another row, add another step. So here, when we have 3 steps selected, now we have 3 steps that we can fill in. Same with 2-step or 1-step. So it's not pegged to just the columns here. Okay, so this is how I like to think about setting up trailing stops. The first field I think about is the one over here to the right that says Profit Trigger. This is the point at which we're going to begin trailing. So in our scenario, we said, start trailing at X ticks. Well, if X is, let's say it's 5. Let's say as soon as you hit 5 ticks, you want to start trailing. That's what you would put in your profit trigger field. So this is the amount of profit at which you want to start trailing. And if you were with us yesterday and you saw us talk about, we covered parameter types, changing parameter types for your ATM strategy. So if you change this to percent, then you could put in a percentage profit trigger and say start trailing when I hit a certain percent of profit. Or if you changed it to price, you could say start trailing when my trade hits this price, when I'm in the trade and the market hits this price. But we're just going to leave it at ticks for today's example. So I'll put a 5 in there. The next thing that I think about is the first field. So I go from the third field to the first field. This is the stop loss field here. Now, this tells it how many ticks behind the current price to place the stop loss when it begins trailing. So let's say when we hit 5 ticks in profit, we want to start trailing 3 ticks behind. So that's where we would enter that 3. We would enter it in the stop loss field. So here, with a profit trigger of 5, we're saying when we hit 5 ticks in profit, stop loss of 3, we're saying move the stop loss to 3 ticks behind the current market price, which, if you do the math, that will be 2 ticks above your entry price, right? Because the profit trigger of 5, we've gone up 5 ticks. Now we're placing it 3 ticks behind that 5-tick gain, so that would be 2 above our entry point. Now the last field is the frequency field. This is the middle field here. This is going to tell the stop strategy how often to move the stop again once it starts trailing. So if you'd like it to start moving tick by tick after it's started, just enter a 1 in this field. This is probably the most common thing that people enter here is a 1, because what they're saying is as soon as it hits 5 ticks in profit, I want to start trailing on every single additional tick. I want to stay 3 ticks behind the current market. So then you'd enter a 1 there. But you could put in, let's say you don't want to move it again until you hit 10 ticks in profit. Well, then you could put a 5 in here. Now what you're saying is move for every additional 5 ticks in profit. So the first move would happen when you hit your profit trigger of 5. The second one would happen when you got 5 more and you were at 10 ticks in profit. Then it would move again when you hit 15 ticks in profit, then again when you hit 20, so on and so forth. So this is both the frequency at which to move it and the amount at which to move it, so that it always remains this many ticks behind. Okay, so let's take a break here and see this in action. So with this setup, we should be able to gain 5 ticks and then see the stop loss move 3 ticks behind the current market price at that point, and then trail on every additional tick. And we'll hear that really cool cash register noise that NinjaTrader has. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. We'll set this up. We'll enter market. I'm going to go long, and let's crank the trend up. And I'm going to go ahead and cancel the profit target and stop loss there so we don't hit the profit target. Oh, sorry about that. Should not have canceled the stop loss. So let's try this one more time with no profit target. Okay, here we go. No profit target. We've got our stop loss. When the yellow line moves up 5 ticks, we should see that stop loss start to trail. Okay, there we go. There's our first trail. Now it should remain 3 ticks behind. Every time you see this little thing flashing here, it tells you it's trailing. And we can see this happening on the chart as well. We can see as the price goes up, the stop loss goes up too. So that's the very basic functionality of a trailing stop. Let's set up one that's a little more complex here. Let's set up 3 full steps. So let's click 3 step here. Now we've got 3 steps to work with. So let's say for the first step, when we get to, let's say, 6 ticks in profit, we want to move it to 5 ticks behind. But then, when we hit 10 ticks in profit, now we want it to be a little closer. We want it to be 3 ticks behind with a frequency of 1 in all of these. Lastly, let's say we're going crazy. When we hit 13 ticks in profit, now we want to trail 1 tick behind because we think this guy is going to turn back around. And again, a frequency of 1 in all of these fields. So let's see this in action and watch it happen. Still have our trend going up. Go ahead and enter market. Okay, so the first one I believe was 5 ticks. When we hit 5 ticks, we'll start trailing, or 6 ticks rather, we'll start trailing 5 behind. So there, that just happened. Now when we get a few more ticks here, it should tighten up and start trailing 3 behind. Okay, so we're trailing 3 behind now. Then when we get a couple more ticks, there we go, we hit that 3rd level. So you can see how the 3-step process works. It's just about tightening up that trail. And so now watch what happens. If I crank this trend down and the price goes down even 1 tick, it just immediately took us out. So in reality, what we did was we absolutely maximized the amount of profit that we could get from that trade. We didn't give it any wiggle room whatsoever once it had gone all the way up there. We've got a comment in the room about the video quality. If anybody else is having any trouble, please let me know, and I may have to refresh my screen. It looks good to me, but let me know, guys, whether or not you're seeing some bad video quality here today. Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, so that is auto trailing in a nutshell. If you'd like more information on that, we've got, like I said, like I always say, we've got pre-recorded versions of all these webinars on our YouTube channel, and we have some really great information about ATM strategies in our online help guide as well. Okay, so let's talk about the next thing here, which is simulated stops. And this is going to be in the stop strategies area too, so we'll go ahead and get back to our stop strategies area. Let's take our trail out of here. Now, the primary purpose of a simulated stop, I'll tell you why it is and then what it is. The primary purpose of it is to hide your order from the market. So essentially what you're doing is you're placing an order that only your platform can see until it's hit. And then a real order is submitted. So it's essentially a stop order that's being simulated by your platform. And when that is hit, then a real-world limit order is placed. So a lot of people like to hide their trades from the market. They don't want to influence volume for one reason or another. And so that's a way that you can do that. Now, the thing about simulated stops, 2 things must occur in order for a simulated stop to be triggered. One is pretty obvious, and that is that the price has to hit that level at which the simulated stop is sitting. But 2 is that it has to meet a certain volume requirement. And this is where this comes into play, the volume trigger. So with a 0 in here, it's just disabled. But let's say I only want this simulated stop to place that real order for me if the volume is, 1,000 on the incoming tick. So I could put 1,000 in there. And now I'll click OK, I'll save that. And then the actual mechanics of how you would place the order is you'd right click here in your order entry window and then click simulated order. And now you can see that's checked in there, and we have this little SO button here. Should be the same over here in NinjaTrader. Same thing, if you're using the chart, you can check simulated order right over here by right-clicking. Now, if I place a stop order, now that order is not, oh, I placed it on the wrong side of the market. If I place a stop order, that order is not actually live. The brokerage doesn't see it, the exchange doesn't see it. Now when the price comes down and hits this, if the volume is 1,000 or greater as we specified in our volume trigger, then it will submit that limit order for you. And then you're going to be filled and the market won't have time to react to that order because it will be filled right there. But if it doesn't meet your volume requirement, then it's just going to be passed over. Okay, so I'm going to disable simulated orders, so our orders are going to be real. And let's go ahead and change that back to 0. That's simulated stops in a nutshell there. Okay, so really quickly, let's take a step back and let's combine break-even and auto trail, just as a refresher and just to show the real flexibility of doing this. So let's say when we hit 4 ticks in profit, we want to break even. So I went ahead and put a 4 in the profit trigger field for the auto break-even section. Let's say once we hit 8 ticks in profit, we want to start trailing. Okay, so what I've done here, take a look at what I've done here. I've set a profit trigger of 8 and a stop loss of 8. So what that means is when we hit a profit trigger of 8, so first of all, when we hit 4, our stop loss is now going to be at break even. When we hit 8, it's essentially going to move that stop loss to 8 ticks behind the current price, which is going to be the exact same as break even. So what this is going to look like in reality is once we hit 8, it's not going to look any different. But since this is a trail, once we get to 9 ticks, 10 ticks, 11 ticks, then that puppy is going to start to move along with the market. So this is how a lot of people like to use this. They want to break even, capture that profit at a certain point, and then when the trade really starts to go in their favor, they want to capture more and more and more profit by moving their stop. So let's go ahead and give this one a whirl. So I'll buy market, crank the trend up. Now when we hit 4 ticks in profit, we'll see that move to break even. There we go. Okay, so we're going to get another 4 ticks of movement, and then it'll stay there. And as soon as we hit that 9th tick, it's just going to start moving in tandem with the price, and it's going to stay 8 ticks away the whole time. So just 1 or 2 more ticks here. There we go. And so from this point, it's going to trail behind. It's just going to keep trailing behind 8 ticks. So, one of those ways to just maximize your profitability. One of those ways to make sure that once you are in the green, maybe your trading strategy requires you to have some big wiggle room. But if it doesn't, if you're scalping especially, a trailing stop can really be a lifesaver. All right, so this is an interactive webinar today. So in addition to you guys putting any questions in the room that you'd like, I'm going to give you guys a couple of quizzes as well. These quizzes are just to make sure we're all on the same page and to make sure that I'm covering the material as thoroughly as I can, because I definitely don't want to leave anybody behind on this material. It's really, really cool stuff. Okay, bear with me just 1 second while I pull up this quiz. We'll take just a moment to look through it together. Okay, here we go. Question this time is this. The stop loss parameter of the auto trail is the number of ticks away from what value? Number of ticks away from the current or last price, from the profit trigger, or from the average entry price? All right, it looks like the room is pretty split. We've got one person that says number 1, the average entry price, and we've got about 3 each that say the profit trigger or the current or last price. Really, this is a bit of a trick question. I mean, the literal answer here is number 3. It would be the current price. It would move it from the current market price. However, the current market price at that point is going to happen to be the same as the profit trigger. So either one of those works. Number 2 or 3 works. When the current price hits the profit trigger, then it moves it that number of ticks away from that price point, which at that moment is the same. So technically current price, but profit trigger works as well. So thank you guys very much for participating there. All right, let's talk about some advanced options here in ATM strategies. If you guys are following along at home, you might notice that your Superdome looks like this, and it's kind of cut off, and you don't see the same amount of options that I did. That's just because you probably have your advanced options turned off. You can turn those on by just right-clicking in the Superdome here, and then checking Advanced Options. And you'll see a few more things come up here below. The first thing I'd like to touch on is this Shadow Strategy box. The shadow strategies are a really great way to make your trading more efficient, specifically your testing of ATM strategies. Basically what this does, a shadow strategy, is you would use this if you want to use ATM strategy number 1, let's say, to enter an order, but you want to see what would have happened if you had used ATM strategy number 2 instead, right? So hypothetically speaking. Whatever you have in the shadow strategy, this is going to be an ATM strategy template here, it's going to place a simulated order in addition to the real order that you place that will use that ATM strategy. So let's say we're trading live and we're working with webinar 1. That's our template. But at the same time, we want to know what our performance would be if we had used webinar 3. But we're not ready to deploy webinar 3 with real money yet. We could use webinar 3 as a shadow strategy. Now, our main order that we place is going to be governed by webinar 1, but another order is going to be simulated in the background under the hood that's going to use webinar 3. So then you can go back and you can say, okay, what was my actual performance for the actual trade I took, and what was the simulated performance for the shadow trade? And then you can look at that and you can say, oh, wow, if I had used webinar 3 all day, I would have made, 50 more ticks of profit. So maybe I should do that next time. It's a tool to kind of give you a little more visibility into the most profitable strategies that you can employ out of the ones that you've developed. So really cool thing to work with there if you're into testing and iterating to find the absolute most efficient strategy setup for your trades. Okay, let's talk about these checkboxes underneath. Reverse at stop and reverse at target. Pretty self-explanatory. What those will do, as soon as your stop loss is hit or your profit target is hit, it will obviously close out the trade, but it will then immediately enter you in the opposite direction with the exact same ATM strategy. So let's see this happen. Let's do reverse at stop. So we're using ATM strategy webinar 1. Let's go ahead and enter. Okay, so I'll crank the trend down. One thing you'll notice, this stop loss order now also has a limit order attached to it. So that's what the platform has done to accomplish this reverse at stop. So we're going to hit that stop loss and be closed out, and at the exact same moment, we're going to hit a limit entry. We're going to be in short in the opposite direction. And there we go. So now we're in short. Now you can see our profit target is now below us. But we still have reverse at close on, so if the trend were to go back up, I'll crank it back up and hit our new short stop loss, it'll put us back in long, and it'll just keep reversing all day. This is good, for people who like to trade within ranges, for example, and you get in on a range bounce, but you say, you know what, if it goes in the wrong direction, I want to make sure that I'm in the right direction. So, if it hits my stop loss, just turn me around and get me in the opposite direction because I think it's going to the other end of the range. That's just one example, but there are many ways that you can use this. Let's just let this get hit here. And once again, we're long, so we can just reverse all day with this. I'll go ahead and close out. Same thing will happen with reverse at target. Reverse at target would be if you think that as soon as you hit your profit target, if you think you've set your profit target in the perfect place at the peak of the trend, then reverse at target will get you in the opposite direction to catch that reversal. Once again, you'll notice a theme here in ATM strategies. It's all about making your workflow more efficient so that you can focus on making profit and not focus on handling the more administrative aspects of your platform. ATMs are one thing that makes NinjaTrader work for you rather than you working for it, so to speak. Okay, target chase. The target chase, it's kind of like an auto trail, but not with the stop loss, with the profit target. What target chase will do is it will move your profit target closer to the entry point as the market goes away from your trade. So let's say you're in a long position and the market goes down. This will start bringing your profit target down lower and lower and lower so that you can get out of the trade profitably in any kind of little retracement. And you can set up a limit to how far this will go in the chase limit field. And actually, you have to set up a limit and see what happens if I click target chase. It says, please enter a chase limit value. So let's say, okay, I want my profit target to chase if the order goes against me, but I don't want it to go more than 5 ticks. Once it's moved 5 ticks closer, and I've lost that 5 ticks of profit, then I want it to stop and I want it to stay there. So then you'd enter a 5 in the chase limit. Then check target chase. Now, the two final checkboxes here, chase and chase if touched, that's the exact same thing as the target chase, except for these two, we're talking about entry orders, pending entry orders, limit orders. What we're saying with these is, we've got our limit entry here, but as the price goes away from our entry in the opposite direction, we want to move our entry closer and closer and closer to the market. Because again, maybe we want to catch that quick retracement when it happens. Maybe we thought a trend was ending, but it wasn't, and we just, we want to follow it up there until it does. Something like that. There are many uses. I'm just trying to come up with a couple real-world examples, but please don't take those as the definitive list of uses for this. The sky's the limit according to your personal trading strategy. And then finally, chase if touched. So chase, it'll start chasing if the price goes through the order. Or no, with chase, it'll start chasing just when the market goes in the opposite direction. Sorry about that. Chase if touched means that this will only start happening if the market touches your order but doesn't actually fill it because it didn't really pass through it. Maybe it only touched it for one quick tick and it wasn't enough to get you a full fill or something like that. Chase if touch is a little more touchy there, no pun intended. So it's again, however you'd like to manage your trade, the options are there. All right, so I'm going to throw another quiz in the room for us here. Bear with me just one moment while I look this one up. Is this the one? That is not the one. Okay. So the question this time is this. Auto chase is used for what order type? I mentioned this very briefly a minute ago, didn't really dwell on it, so I'm glad that we've got this quiz here. So let me know if you remember what we said is the order type that's used for. So it is an entry, but what kind of order type? All right, so we're kind of split down the middle with limit orders and stop limit orders. It would actually be limit orders. This is used for limit orders specifically. Thank you guys for that. It's kind of can be hard to remember, but it's one of those things. Once you get it, once you understand why, and you've seen it happen a couple times, it's kind of easy to remember after that. But appreciate you guys' participation in there. Okay, so that covers most of what we had covered today. I'd also like to talk about going long and short at the same time in the same market. That's something that a lot of people like to do, whether it be setting up a breakout order or even doing something like submitting orders to different accounts. I don't think hedging is a possibility in the United States, but any international clients, you can use this for hedging in the same market as well. So the first thing we need to do is revisit this idea of the ATM strategy selection mode that we spoke about yesterday. So we want to change the ATM strategy selection mode to display the active ATM strategy only. Remember, that's the solution that we talked about yesterday for when you don't want to see all orders on the instrument in the same dome or on the same chart. You only want to see the ones related to the active ATM strategy that you have selected. Let's actually mosey on over here and use NinjaTrader for this demonstration today. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click in the NinjaTrader and click NinjaTrader Properties. And here is our ATM strategy selection mode, same thing we were working with in the Superdome. I currently have it to select active ATM strategy on order submission, which if you remember from yesterday, what that will do, as soon as I enter an order with an ATM strategy, the drop-down will switch to display the active ATM strategy as opposed to staying on the template. So if I had this at keep selected ATM strategy template on order submission, it would be a little different. Now, this time, it will stay on the template itself. We'll go ahead and enter, and it stays on the template. That's not to say we can't switch it to the active. It's just determining the default behavior of what the drop-down shows. And remember why this is important is with the active strategy selected, if we scale in, our new profit target and stop loss orders will be scaled into the existing levels where the existing brackets are. If we switch it to the template, we're working with a brand new ATM strategy instance, and it'll submit new profit target and stop loss levels, new price levels. Okay, so let's go ahead and demonstrate that final setting. We will switch this to the third setting, display selected ATM strategy only. Let's go ahead and set ourselves up a little bracket here. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use webinar 1, and I'm going to, let's say that let's call this a consolidation here. So I'll set up a sell stop here with this ATM strategy. And now I'll switch this back to the template. That order disappeared because we're only displaying orders for the selected active ATM strategy. And now let's set up the long entry here, buy stop. And now as you can see, we now have two active ATM strategies, and the one that we select is going to be the only one displayed on the screen. So one of them doesn't know about the other one. So it's not going to do anything funky like thinking that one of them is an exit or one of them is a bracket protective stop for the other or something like that. So let's try to get these guys both filled here. So that one's now filled. This one's now filled. So now that we're filled, same thing. We're seeing the stop loss and profit target for ATM strategy 14 when we have that selected, and for 15 when we have that selected. It looks like they're in a similar location because they got filled at the same point, but you'll notice on the long one we've got our stop loss at the bottom, short one stop loss at the top. So that's how you can kind of tell there. So it's a really good trick. It's a really good thing to know. It's one of those things that empowers you to use ATM strategies to the fullest. Just keep in mind, certain key things, like, for example, if you're doing something like this in the same account, you could very easily flatten yourself out. ATM strategy number 1 thinks you're long, ATM strategy number 2 thinks you're short, and the brokerage says, hey, you went long and then went short, so you're flat. So it's really important to understand your actual account position when you're doing things like this, and just be fully aware of where you actually are in your account, regardless of what you're seeing. All right, everybody. Before we wrap up, I'm going to go ahead and close out of NinjaTrader by clicking File, Exit. And the question comes up, do you want to save this workspace? I'm going to click no to all. The reason I'm going to click no, as we discussed yesterday, is because I like the way the workspace opened today when I first opened it, and I have not made any changes that I want to keep. So standard practice in that instance is to click no. So just always remember that. If you want the workspace to open up next time the same way that it opened up this time, always click no to all. If you click yes to all, if you get in the habit of clicking yes to all, what can often happen is you make a change without even really remembering it or thinking about it, and then you save over that change. Maybe you've closed a chart, then you click yes to all here, and your workspace is now saved without that chart. And the next time it doesn't come up, and you're wondering, where the heck is my chart? Well, that's the reason. So always think, have I made any changes that I want to save? I personally have not, so I'm going to go ahead and click no here. All right, everybody, that's just basically it for the advanced ATM strategies. We did go over a lot today. If you do have any remaining questions, please feel free to enter them into the room now. I'll take a few moments to address those and stick around. Be sure to join Alex tomorrow for the Workspace 101 event held at 2 p.m., where we're going to cover the final steps when creating your complete and customized workspace. Then we're going to save it, and you can share it with others, and you can create more or extend it or customize it however you want to handle it. So if you've been following us all week, this is definitely a good kind of capstone event to finish off this journey of the workspace we've been creating.